San Clemente, California. It's a place where the sun seems to kiss the Pacific just right, a postcard town of rolling hills and ocean breezes. In this idyllic corner of the world, Susann and Dr. Eric Scott Sills had built what looked like a perfect life. They had it all. A sprawling home with a breathtaking view, a thriving, high-profile fertility clinic that brought joy to countless families, and their own children, a testament to the very science they championed. They were a power couple, respected and admired, the very picture of success. But as we so often learn, pictures can be deceiving, can't they? They can hide the shadows lurking just outside the frame. Beneath the shimmering surface of their achievements, a different story was unfolding, one of quiet desperation and simmering tension. Susann, the vibrant business mind behind their clinic, was feeling trapped, her private texts revealing a deep sense of unease. Scott, the brilliant doctor, was allegedly harboring secrets of his own. The foundation of their perfect life, so carefully constructed, was trembling. No one in their sun-drenched community could have imagined that this carefully curated world was on the brink of a violent collapse. A collapse that would end not with a gradual crumble, but with a sudden, shocking, and brutal finality. It all came to a head on a cool November morning in 2016. The illusion of perfection was not just cracked, it was utterly shattered. Susann Sills, a woman known for her energy and grace, was found lifeless at the bottom of a staircase in her own home. The initial story was a simple, tragic accident. A fall, a terrible misstep in the dark. But the truth, as it often does, refused to stay buried. It began to whisper from the silent evidence left behind, telling a far more sinister tale. A tale of a marriage not of partnership but of conflict. A tale that would turn a respected healer into a prime suspect in a chilling murder investigation. The mystery began with that single devastating event. How did a healthy, agile 45-year-old woman meet such a grim end in the safety of her house? The first answer offered was heartbreakingly plausible, but as investigators peeled back the layers of the Sills' domestic life, the narrative began to shift dramatically. The story of a simple fall dissolved, replaced by evidence of a violent struggle, of secrets, and of betrayal. The question was no longer just how Susann died, but why. And the search for that answer would expose the dark reality hidden behind the facade of a picture-perfect Southern California dream. Who were the Sills? To the outside world, they were a modern success story. Dr. Scott Sills was a leading light in the world of reproductive medicine. An author of medical textbooks, a sought-after expert, he was the kind of doctor who gave people hope. He was the face of the Center for Advanced Genetics, a clinic he co-founded with his wife, Susann. She was the engine that made it all run. Susann wasn't just the doctor's wife, she was the indispensable business manager, the co-founder who handled the complex logistics that allowed Scott to focus on the science. Together they made a formidable team, professionally and, it seemed, personally. Their own family story was deeply intertwined with their professional lives. Susan had once been Scott's patient, seeking help to start a family. Their professional relationship blossomed into a personal one. They married, and through the very IVF treatments they offered to others, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl. Theirs was a blended family. As Scott had two older children from a previous marriage, they presented a united front, a happy, bustling household filled with the laughter of 4 children and the energy of 2 ambitious parents. They were living the life they helped create for so many others, or so it appeared. Friends and colleagues saw Susann as the heart of the operation. She was described as warm, dedicated, and full of life. She was agile and active, not the kind of person you would imagine being prone to a clumsy, fatal accident. Scott was the intellectual force, the brilliant mind. In their community, they were not just another wealthy couple. They were pillars of their field, respected for their contributions and their seemingly harmonious partnership. The clinic was their shared passion, a testament to their love and professional synergy. But shared passions can sometimes curdle into shared pressures, and success can breed its own unique set of complications. Behind the closed doors of their multi-million-dollar home, the portrait began to look different. The pressures of running a demanding business, managing a large family, and navigating the intricate dynamics of a marriage were taking a toll. Financial tensions, the kind that can strain even the strongest bonds, were reportedly present. The harmony that defined their public image was, perhaps, more of a performance. The perfect family portrait, upon closer inspection, was beginning to show fine cracks, the kind that spread silently until the entire picture is ready to fall apart at the slightest touch. And that touch was coming. It was just before 5 a.m. on November 13, 2016. The quiet of the pre-dawn hours in San Clemente was broken by a frantic 911 call. On the line was Dr. Scott Sills. His voice was filled with panic. He told the dispatcher he had just woken up to a horrifying discovery. He had found his wife, Susann, at the bottom of their main staircase. She wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing. He said he had been sleeping in a different room because Susann was suffering from a debilitating migraine, and he didn't want to disturb her. It was a story of a terrible, tragic accident. When paramedics arrived, the scene seemed to support his account. Susann Sills was pronounced dead, right there on the floor of her beautiful home. Near her body were items that painted a picture of a clumsy, late-night tumble. One of her shoes was off. A stainless steel soup pot lay nearby as if it had been dropped. There was a purse and an empty bottle of pain medication, suggesting she might have been disoriented. Dr. Sills offered another detail: their 2 large rescue dogs. He suggested the playful animals might have tugged on the scarf Susann was wearing, pulling her off balance and contributing to the fatal fall. At first glance, it was a plausible, if heartbreaking, scenario. A woman, groggy from a migraine and perhaps medication, stumbles in the dark and takes a catastrophic fall. There were no signs of a break-in, no obvious indications of a violent home invasion. The initial response from law enforcement treated it as a potential accident. The grieving husband was comforted. The family began to process the sudden, shocking loss. The community reeled, mourning the untimely death of a woman who seemed to have everything to live for. For a moment the story was simple, sad, and straightforward. But even in those first few hours, small details began to feel off. To the trained eyes of the first responders and investigators, something wasn't quite right. The position of the body, the arrangement of the items around her. It felt a little too neat. A little too staged. The narrative Dr. Sills provided was comprehensive, almost too much so, offering explanations for every possible question. The story of the dogs and the scarf, while imaginative, raised eyebrows. It was a theory, yes. But was it the truth? The quiet hum of suspicion had begun, a low frequency beneath the loud clamor of grief. The investigation was just beginning. The official story held for a time. The community mourned Susann's accidental death, but behind the scenes, investigators from the Orange County Sheriff's Department were not so sure. The scene at the bottom of the stairs felt staged, like a play designed to lead them to a specific conclusion. An accident. A tragedy. End of story. But detectives are paid to read between the lines, to question the script. They started with the autopsy, the silent testimony of the victim's body. And what the medical examiner found would blow the case wide open. This was no simple fall. The first major red flag came from the coroner's examination of Susann's neck. There was a distinct ligature mark, a clear line of injury indicating that something had been wrapped tightly around her throat. Furthermore, the autopsy revealed petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, tiny broken blood vessels that are a classic hallmark of asphyxiation and strangulation. These were not injuries consistent with a tumble down the stairs. A fall can break bones, cause concussions, and create bruises. But it doesn't typically leave the telltale signs of someone being slowly and deliberately choked to death. The whispers of doubt grew into a roar. Then, there were the other injuries. Susann had defensive wounds on her arms, the kind a person gets while fighting for their life, trying to fend off an attacker. And her C3 vertebra, one of the bones in her neck, was fractured. While a fall could potentially cause such an injury, it was also highly consistent with the force applied during a violent strangulation. And what about the migraine medication? Toxicology reports showed that while Susann did have pain medicine in her system, the levels were therapeutic, not high enough to cause the severe disorientation or loss of balance that would lead to such a catastrophic fall. The accident theory was crumbling fast. The medical examiner's conclusion was definitive. In November 2017, nearly a year after her death, the official cause was changed. Susann Sills' death was ruled a homicide. The cause ligature strangulation. Suddenly, the case was no longer about a tragic accident, it was about murder. Investigators now had to ask a new set of questions. If Susann was murdered, who did it? And if the struggle didn't happen on the stairs, where did it happen? The focus of the investigation shifted from the bottom of the staircase to the rest of the house, and specifically, to the one person who was there that night, her husband, Dr. Scott Sills. With the ruling of homicide, the investigation intensified, and the lens focused squarely on the Sills home. If Susann was strangled, the staircase was likely not the primary crime scene. It was the final act, the place where her body was arranged to sell a story. Investigators went back to the house, searching for the real stage. They found it upstairs, in their daughter's bedroom. This was the room where Scott claimed Susann had been sleeping to nurse her migraine. And on the wall and the curtains of that room, they found what they were looking for. Blood. The small, almost imperceptible bloodstains told a story of violence. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Susann. This was the site of the struggle. This was where she fought for her life. The evidence suggested a brutal confrontation had taken place not in the open space of the stairway, but in the confines of a quiet bedroom. The theory was now clear. Susann was killed upstairs, and her body was then carried or dragged downstairs and positioned to look like she had fallen. The stage scene at the bottom of the stairs was a calculated act of deception, designed to misdirect and conceal a terrible truth. But there was more. The evidence began to connect the crime directly to Dr. Sills. A shirt he was wearing that morning had a suspicious stain on it. He claimed it was chocolate milk, but laboratory tests told a different story. It was Susann's blood. And perhaps most damning of all, forensics teams analyzed the scrapings from underneath Susann's fingernails. There, they found male DNA. It belonged to her husband, Scott Sills. This was the physical proof of her final desperate struggle. She had fought back, leaving her attacker's mark on her own body, a silent accusation from beyond the grave. The blood evidence created an undeniable narrative. A mixture of Scott's and Susann's DNA was found in the bloodstains in the bedroom, painting a vivid picture of a two-person struggle. The science was relentless, each new finding dismantling the accidental fall theory piece by piece. The blood on his shirt, his DNA under her nails, her blood on the bedroom wall, it all pointed to a violent altercation between husband and wife. The man who had called 911 in a panic, the grieving husband, was now the prime suspect in his wife's murder. The evidence didn't just speak, it screamed. Why would a successful doctor, a man who seemed to have everything, murder his wife? That was the question prosecutors had to answer. As they dug into the Sills' private lives, they uncovered a marriage that was far from the perfect partnership it appeared to be. The investigation revealed deep-seated tensions, both financial and personal. The high-stakes pressure of running their fertility clinic had become a source of conflict, but honestly, the cracks ran deeper than just business disagreements. There were whispers of infidelity and a profound emotional disconnect. Investigators found text messages sent by Susann in the time leading up to her death. In them, she expressed a feeling of being trapped, writing that she felt she would never be free. These were not the words of a woman in a happy, supportive marriage. They were the words of someone feeling suffocated, desperate for an escape that seemed impossible. The prosecution argued that this simmering unhappiness was the backdrop for the final, fatal argument. In fact, one of the couple's children later told investigators they had heard their parents arguing loudly on the night Susann died. The perfect home was not a peaceful one. The motive, prosecutors alleged, was solidified by a particularly volatile discovery. Investigators found a printout in the home of an online forum exchange. The topic was a topless photo of Susann. Apparently, she had posted the photo online after losing a bet related to the 2016 presidential election. The prosecution argued that this act, seen by Scott as a betrayal or a source of immense embarrassment, may have been the final trigger. It was a public act of defiance that could have enraged a controlling husband, pushing an already fractured relationship past its breaking point and into violence. Adding another layer to the motive, the state presented evidence that Dr. Sills was engaged in an extramarital affair. They pointed to communications with another woman, suggesting he was emotionally, if not physically, involved elsewhere. This alleged infidelity, combined with the business stress and the public embarrassment over the online photo, created a potent and toxic cocktail. The prosecution's theory was that Dr. Sills wanted out of the marriage, but wasn't willing to face the financial and personal fallout of a divorce. Murder, they argued, became his horrific solution, a way to be free himself, while framing it as a tragic accident. After years of investigation and delays, the trial of Dr. Scott Sills began in late 2023. It was a courtroom showdown, pitting two starkly different narratives against each other. On one side, the prosecution, led by the Orange County District Attorney's Office, laid out its case for murder. They meticulously presented the forensic evidence, the ligature marks, the petechial hemorrhaging, the bloodstains in the bedroom, the DNA under Susann's fingernails, and the blood on Scott's shirt. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall they were building around the defendant, a wall of guilt. The prosecution painted a picture of a calculated, cold-blooded killer. They argued that Dr. Sills, enraged by a combination of marital strife, financial pressure, and his wife's online behavior, strangled Susann in the upstairs bedroom during a heated argument. Then, in a chilling act of deceit, he carried her body downstairs and carefully staged the scene to look like an accident. They presented the text messages showing Susann's unhappiness and the testimony about the argument heard by their child. The motive, they contended, was clear. He wanted his wife gone, and this was his way of making it happen without consequence. On the other side, the defense, led by attorney Jack Early, fought back with the only story they had, the accidental fall. They argued that the prosecution's case was purely circumstantial. They maintained that Susann, weakened by a migraine, simply lost her footing and fell down the stairs. The defense tried to cast doubt on the forensic evidence. They suggested the injuries to her neck could have been caused by the scarf she was wearing getting tangled during the fall, perhaps exacerbated by the two large dogs tugging on it in a playful panic. It was a tragic, freak accident, they insisted, not a murder. The defense team worked to portray Dr. Sills as a loving, grieving husband who was being wrongfully accused. They highlighted his respected career and his contributions to the community, attempting to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. Could a man who spent his life creating families be capable of destroying his own? They questioned the interpretation of the blood evidence and argued that the signs of a struggle could be explained by the chaos of the fall itself. The jury was left to decide between two irreconcilable realities: a tragic accident or a cleverly disguised murder. The jury listened intently for weeks as both sides presented their cases. They heard from forensic experts who explained the science of strangulation. They saw the crime scene photos and the diagrams of the blood spatter. They listened to the emotional testimony and the cold, hard facts of the autopsy report. They were presented with the image of Dr. Scott Sills, the respected healer, and contrasted it with the prosecution's image of Scott Sills, the enraged husband. They had to decide which portrait was real. The weight of the evidence in the end proved overwhelming. In December 2023, after deliberating, the jury returned with its decision. They found Dr. Eric Scott Sills guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict confirmed what investigators had suspected for years. Susann Sills did not fall. She was killed by the one person who had vowed to love and protect her. The man who had built a family with her, who had shared a business and a life with her, was responsible for her violent end. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, the final chapter in a long and painful journey for justice. For Susann's family and friends, it was a moment of somber validation. A few months later, in March 2024, Dr. Sills returned to court for his sentencing. He was handed a term of 15 years to life in prison. The brilliant career was over. The respect he'd commanded was gone, replaced by the infamy of a convicted murderer. The California Medical Board officially revoked his license to practice medicine, a final, symbolic end to the life he had so carefully constructed. The man who once gave the gift of life to others would now spend the rest of his own behind bars, stripped of his freedom and his legacy. The sentence brought a legal conclusion to the case, but it could not undo the damage. The couple's children, already having lost their mother in the most traumatic way imaginable, now had to grapple with the reality that their father was her killer. Susann's extended family, some of whom had initially supported Scott, were left to process the profound betrayal. The conviction sent shockwaves through the medical community and the quiet town of San Clemente. The perfect picture had been torn to shreds, revealing an ugly and violent reality that had been hidden in plain sight all along. The case of Susann Sills is a haunting reminder that the most dangerous place for a woman can often be her own home. It's a story about the deceptive nature of appearances and the dark secrets that can fester behind the closed doors of even the most affluent and successful households. From the outside, the Sills family had everything. But inside, a tragedy was brewing, fueled by resentment, control, and anger. The story serves as a chilling lesson. We never truly know what happens in the private lives of others, no matter how perfect they may seem. The impact of this crime continues to ripple outward. The couple's 4 children face a future forever marked by this unspeakable trauma. They must navigate a world where one parent was stolen from them by the other. The community of San Clemente was forced to reconcile the image of the respected Dr. Sills with the reality of the convicted killer who lived among them. For the countless families that the Sills' clinic had helped, the case casts a dark shadow over their own joyous stories, a reminder that the hands that gave them life were also capable of taking it. This case also highlights the critical importance of diligent and patient police work. The initial narrative of an accidental fall could have easily been accepted. It was the simpler, less disturbing explanation. But investigators refused to accept the story at face value. They trusted their instincts, followed the science, and allowed the evidence to speak for itself. From the subtle ligature marks to the microscopic DNA evidence under Susann's fingernails, it was forensic science that unraveled Scott Sills' elaborate deception and ensured that the truth of his wife's final moments was brought into the light. In the end, the legacy of Susann Sills is one of tragedy, but also one of warning. Her death is a stark testament to the hidden realities of domestic conflict and the devastating consequences of secrets and lies. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the nature of the relationships we see around us, and the silent struggles that may be happening just beneath the surface. The sun still shines on San Clemente, the waves still crash on the shore, but for those who knew Susann Sills, a permanent shadow remains, a reminder of a perfect life that was anything but, and of a chilling mystery that was finally and heartbreakingly solved.